Professor Hallis adjusted the floating display panel in front of the classroom, her 4 delicate fingers tapping against the smooth surface. The Renthi educator had taught at Galactic Academy for 12 cycles, and she prided herself on creating lessons that brought different species together. Today's announcement would be her most ambitious project yet. Students, your next assignment will explore the concept of companion animals across our various cultures, she said, her voice carrying the melodic quality typical of her species. You will present one creature from your homeworld that your people keep for companionship, comfort, or cultural significance. The classroom hummed with excited chatter. 17 species sat in specially designed seats that accommodated their wildly different bodies. Some students floated in liquid-filled spheres. Others rested on heated platforms. A few hung from the ceiling by choice. Near the back, 3 humans sat together. David Reed leaned back in his chair, a slight smile crossing his face. Amy Sullivan exchanged a quick glance with Robert Haynes, and both tried to suppress their grins. They had been at the academy for 6 months now, carefully navigating the complicated social structure of interspecies education. The other students found humans fascinating and slightly concerning in equal measure. Paris, a Valine student whose skin currently glowed a pleasant lavender, raised one of her 3 arms. Professor, should we bring visual recordings or actual specimens? Either would be acceptable, Professor Hallis replied, though I encourage actual specimens if they are safe and transportable. Nothing builds understanding quite like direct interaction. The Quarren student named Helix bubbled enthusiastically in his moisture-filled sphere. Through his translator, his voice came out high and cheerful. I can bring my family's companion. It is very small and changes colors based on the emotional environment. Very calming to observe. Other students began volunteering information about their own choices. The Baltrine student described a creature that floated on air currents and hummed at specific frequencies that promoted relaxation. The Serene student talked about a small being made of crystalline structures that grew in geometric patterns and never made demands for food or attention. What about you humans? Asked a Trill student named Austin, his antenna twitching with curiosity. Do your people keep companion animals? Amy nodded, keeping her expression neutral. Oh yes. Companion animals are very common in human culture. Most families have at least one. Wonderful, Professor Hallis said, clearly pleased. Then you 3 can coordinate your presentation. Perhaps show us the diversity of human companionship practices. The 3 humans agreed quietly. After class ended and the other students filtered out, they gathered near the large windows that showed the space station's view of the nearby nebula. So, Robert said, running a hand through his dark hair. Should we tell them what we're planning or just let it be a surprise? David shook his head. I don't think they'd believe us anyway. Remember when we mentioned that thing about sharks during marine biology? Half the class thought we were joking. Amy pulled out her communication device, scrolling through images from home. My parents can ship Bruno here in a transport pod. He's well-trained and friendly. He'd be perfect. I was thinking about bringing Noodle, Robert added. She's calm, easy to handle, and honestly pretty beautiful. Plus she's small enough that she won't scare anyone too badly. David laughed. I can bring Rosie. She's practically a beginner's choice back home. Nothing scary about her at all. The 3 of them began making arrangements, sending messages back to Earth and coordinating with the station's customs department. The process took several days, but the Academy was used to accommodating unusual requests from students representing dozens of worlds. Meanwhile, other students prepared their presentations. Paris practiced her speech about the Glimmerwing, a hand-sized creature from her homeworld that fed on ambient light and produced a soft glow at night. Helix worked on creating a perfect environment sphere for his color-changing Mosspuff. The Fenrir student, usually quiet and reserved, carefully assembled a presentation about the singing stones her people kept in their meditation gardens. The week passed quickly. Professor Hallis reminded everyone daily about the cultural sensitivity required for the assignment. She emphasized that no one should judge another species' choices, that diversity and companionship reflected the beautiful variety of life across the galaxy. On the evening before presentation day, Amy sat in the human quarters with Bruno's transport pod nearby. The big dog inside was sleeping peacefully, unaware that tomorrow he would become the center of attention for beings from across the stars. She checked his health readings, made sure his favorite toys were packed, and reviewed her notes one more time. Robert's quarters held a smaller container where Noodle coiled comfortably on her heating pad. The snake had traveled well, and Robert had already confirmed with the station's environmental systems that the temperature would be suitable for her demonstration. David prepared Rosie's terrarium with meticulous care. The tarantula had molted during the journey, and her new exoskeleton gleamed under the soft light. He added some substrate and a small water dish, making sure everything was perfect for tomorrow's show. None of them realized that their definition of companion animal existed in a completely different context than what the rest of the galaxy understood. On their homeworlds, the other species had developed relationships with creatures that posed no threat, required minimal care, and existed primarily as aesthetic or emotional additions to daily life. Humans had taken a different path, but tomorrow the galaxy would learn exactly what that path looked like. Professor Hallis reviewed her lesson plan one final time, satisfied that this assignment would create meaningful dialogue between species. She imagined the gentle creatures her students would present, the calm discussions about care and bonding, and the way this would help everyone understand each other better. She fell asleep that night completely unprepared for what the next day would bring. The classroom filled slowly that morning as students arrived with their various companions. Paris entered first, carrying a small transparent container where her glimmerwing fluttered on nearly invisible wings. The tiny creature pulsed with soft yellow light, and several students made appreciative sounds as they watched it dance through the air inside its enclosure. Helix rolled his moisture sphere to his usual spot, and inside it floated the moss puff, a fuzzy blob about the size of a human fist. It shifted from pale blue to soft green as other students approached, responding to their curiosity with chromatic changes. The Baltrine student arrived with their floating companion, which drifted in lazy circles above their head, producing a gentle humming that made the whole room feel peaceful. Professor Hallis smiled at the displays already arranged on various desks. This was exactly what she had hoped for, a beautiful sharing of cultures, a demonstration of the gentle bonds between sentient beings and the creatures they chose to keep close. Then Amy walked in carrying a large container, and the energy in the room shifted subtly. The presentations began in order of galactic seating arrangements. The Baltrine student went first, explaining how their people had bred the floaters for thousands of years, selecting for the most pleasing hums and gentlest temperaments. The creature demonstrated its abilities, drifting between students and adjusting its frequency to match the room's emotional state. Paris presented next, releasing her glimmerwing into a contained field where it could fly freely. It performed loops and spirals, leaving trails of bioluminescent particles in the air. She explained that children on her world often fell asleep, watching these creatures create light patterns on bedroom ceilings. 3 more presentations followed, each showcasing small harmless creatures that required minimal care and provided aesthetic or emotional benefits. The class was relaxed, engaged, asking thoughtful questions about care requirements and bonding behaviors. Then Professor Hallis called on Amy. "I'll be presenting one of the most common companion animals from Earth," Amy said, standing next to her container. "Humans have lived alongside these creatures for thousands of years. They're loyal, protective, and considered part of the family in most human households." She opened the container. Bruno burst out with enthusiastic energy, his tail wagging so hard his entire back half swayed with the motion. The German Shepherd was in his prime, 80 pounds of muscle covered in black and tan fur. His tongue hung out as he panted happily, and his dark eyes scanned the room with interest. The reaction was instantaneous and dramatic. Paris's skin flashed from lavender to deep purple, the Valine danger color. She scrambled backward so fast her desk scraped loudly against the floor. Helix's moisture sphere suddenly clouded as protective membranes snapped shut over his eyes. The Baltrine student's floater shot upward and pressed against the ceiling, its hum turning into a high-pitched whine. Asen, the Trill student, activated his personal shield with a sharp crackle of energy. 2 other students bolted for the door. A Serene in the corner made a sound like breaking glass. Bruno, completely oblivious to the panic he caused, trotted happily toward the nearest student with his tail still wagging. He wanted to make friends. "Wait," Amy called out, seeing the terror in the room. "He's friendly. He won't hurt anyone." But the class was looking at something entirely different than what Amy saw. They observed forward-facing eyes, the mark of a predator that tracked prey. They saw a mouth full of sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. They noted the powerful legs built for chasing, the claws that clicked against the floor, and the sheer size of the creature that could easily overpower most species in the room. Professor Hallis stood frozen behind her desk, her hand hovering over the emergency containment button. Amy quickly called Bruno to her side. "Bruno, sit." The dog immediately sat, looking up at her with adoration. "See? He's trained. He follows commands. Watch, Bruno, shake." Bruno lifted his right paw. Amy grasped it gently and shook it, demonstrating the trick that human children often taught their dogs as a first lesson in bonding. The class remained silent, watching this bizarre display of a human voluntarily touching a predator's striking limb. "Bruno is a German Shepherd," Amy continued, trying to salvage her presentation. "His breed was developed to herd livestock and guard property. They're intelligent, loyal, and protective. In my home, Bruno sleeps in my little sister's bedroom. He's never hurt anyone in his entire life. You allow this creature near your young?" Professor Hallis asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Amy said, genuinely confused by the question. "Dogs are great with kids. They're gentle and patient. Bruno once found my sister when she wandered off in a park. He stayed with her for 3 hours until we found them." Robert leaned over to David and whispered, "Should we mention wolves?" David shook his head rapidly. "Maybe not yet." But Amy had already moved on to that part of her presentation. Dogs descended from wolves. They're apex predators that hunted in packs on Earth. Humans domesticated them over thousands of years. We basically took one of the most successful predators on our world and turned them into companions. The word apex predator hung in the air like a weapon. Paris found her voice, though it trembled. "You took a pack hunter from your world and brought it into your dwelling places? Intentionally?" "Well, yes," Amy said. "They're really good at guarding homes. And they're loyal. Once a dog bonds with a human family, that bond is incredibly strong. They'd die to protect their people." This information did not have the reassuring effect Amy intended. Bruno, sensing the tension in the room, whined softly and pressed against Amy's leg. She scratched behind his ears, which made his back leg thump against the floor in pleasure. To the watching aliens, it looked like the predator was preparing to strike. Professor Hallis cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should take a short break before the next presentation." Half the class evacuated immediately. The break lasted 20 minutes. During that time, several students contacted their academic advisors asking if they could skip the remainder of the presentations. 3 filed formal complaints about dangerous creatures being brought to campus without proper warning. One student from a species that communicated through color changes had turned a shade that translated roughly to existential dread and refused to change back. Professor Hallis spent the break reading Earth's biological database entries, growing more concerned with each passing minute. She discovered that Earth classified as a Class 12 death world, a designation usually reserved for planets where life evolved under extreme competitive pressure. She learned about Earth's gravity, its temperature swings, its violent weather patterns, and most disturbingly, its food chain structure. Nearly everything on Earth either hunted or was hunted. There was no middle ground. When class resumed, only 9 of the original 17 students had returned. They sat in a cluster near the back, as far from the humans as the room's dimensions allowed. Bruno had been returned to his container, where he lay peacefully napping after all the excitement. Professor Hallis addressed the room with forced calm. "We will continue with the presentations. I remind everyone that this is a learning environment, and we must approach other cultures with open minds." She did not sound convinced by her own words. Robert stood up, carrying a container that looked mercifully smaller than the one that had held Bruno. "I thought I'd present something calmer," he said. "This is Noodle. She's a ball python, and she's about 3 feet long." He opened the container and lifted out the snake. The remaining students collectively inhaled. One immediately left. Another activated their shield again. Noodle coiled calmly in Robert's hands, her scales gleaming under the classroom lights. She was beautiful in an alien way, her pattern of browns and golds creating intricate designs along her body. Her tongue flicked out, tasting the air, and her head swayed slightly as she adjusted to the new environment. Pythons are constrictors, Robert explained, seemingly unaware of the fresh wave of horror spreading through his audience. They wrap around their prey and squeeze until the prey can't breathe anymore. Then they swallow it whole. Paris made a sound like escaping steam. Her skin had gone beyond purple into a shade that might have been ultraviolet terror. Noodle can. Unhinge her jaw, Robert continued, warming to his subject. That means she can eat things bigger around than her own body. It's pretty amazing to watch, actually. She has these special joints that let her mouth open really wide. Helix's moisture sphere began bubbling violently. Oh, and she has heat sensing. Pits here. Robert pointed to small indentations near Noodle's mouth. She can hunt in complete darkness by detecting the body heat of prey, and her scales let her move almost silently. She's an ambush predator, so silence is really important. Asen finally found his voice. And you allow this creature to coil around your body, voluntarily? Sure, Robert said, demonstrating by draping Noodle across his shoulders. The snake settled into place, forming comfortable loops. She likes warm spots. Sometimes she curls up in my jacket pocket when I'm watching videos. My girlfriend thinks she's really cute. The word girlfriend registered dimly through the class's panic. This meant that multiple humans found the creature acceptable. This wasn't an aberration. It was cultural. Professor Hallis had both hands on her desk, gripping it for stability. How common are these pythons as companion animals on Earth? Pretty common, Robert said. Ball pythons are actually considered beginner snakes. They're docile and relatively small. Some people keep reticulated pythons or anacondas, but those get really big, like 20 or 30 feet long. A Fenrir student who had remained silent until now made a sound like a ship's hull breaching. The universal translator struggled to find words but eventually settled on, "Your people keep 30-foot-long constricting predators? As pets?" "Some people do," Robert confirmed. "They need really big enclosures, though, and they eat larger prey. Not practical for most households." David leaned toward Amy. "I'm starting to think my presentation might not help." "Too late now," she whispered back. Robert continued, oblivious to the psychological damage he was inflicting. "Noodle eats once every 2 weeks. Frozen mice mostly. She's really low maintenance. Doesn't need walks like dogs do, doesn't make noise, and she's content to just hang out and be lazy most of the time." "It consumes other creatures whole," Paris said, her voice flat with shock. "And you keep it in your dwelling, where you sleep." "Her tank is in my bedroom, yeah," Robert confirmed. "The warmth from the heating pad is soothing. Sometimes I fall asleep watching her." Professor Hallis pulled up Earth's database again, specifically searching for information about serpents. What she found made her regret asking. Earth had over 3,000 species of snakes. Some had venom that could kill within minutes. Some grew large enough to eat deer. Some lived in water, some in trees, some underground. Humans had been both predator and prey to various snake species throughout their evolution, yet somehow decided to bring them into their homes as companions. "Can I ask a question?" Helix's voice bubbled through his translator. "What is wrong with your world that you need these kinds of creatures as companions? What threatens you that requires such dangerous guardians?" Robert blinked, genuinely confused. "Noodle's not a guardian, she's a pet. She's cute and interesting to watch, that's all." "Cute," Paris repeated, as if testing whether the word meant something different in human languages. "Yeah," Robert said, stroking Noodle's head gently. The snake's tongue flicked out again. "Look at her little face. She's adorable." The remaining students looked at the creature that could kill by suffocation, that ate prey whole, that hunted by sensing heat and darkness. They tried to see what Robert saw. They failed completely. David stood up with his terrarium, knowing his turn had arrived. "So," he said, "who wants to learn about spiders?" 2 more students fled. Only 6 students remained in their seats. Professor Hallis had given up on maintaining academic composure and had activated the emergency containment protocols for the classroom. Energy barriers now stood ready to deploy at a moment's notice. The station's security had been notified. Just as a precaution, the professor told herself, though her hands shook slightly as she sent the alert. David placed his terrarium on the presentation desk. Through the transparent walls, the students could see substrate, a small water dish, and what appeared to be a burrow entrance. Nothing moved inside. "This is Rosie," David said. "She's a Chilean rose tarantula. She's about 5 years old, which means she's still pretty young. They can live for 20 years or more." He reached into the terrarium carefully. His hand disappeared into the burrow, and when it emerged, a creature from Nightmare sat calmly on his palm. Rosie was the size of David's hand, her body covered in pink-tinged hairs that caught the light. 8 legs moved with mechanical precision as she adjusted her position. 8 eyes reflected the classroom lights like tiny dark mirrors, seeing in nearly all directions at once. The sound that came from the remaining students was hard to describe. It started as individual gasps and merged into a collective noise of pure biological fear response. Arachnids triggered something primal across multiple species, some ancient memory of small venomous things that hid in dark places. Asen's shield flared bright enough to cast shadows. Paris had stopped producing colors entirely. Her skin had gone to some neutral gray that suggested complete system shutdown. The Fenrir student's breathing apparatus began cycling faster, producing a sound like a broken ventilation system. David seemed to interpret the reaction as interest rather than terror. "She's really calm," he explained. "Tarantulas are actually pretty docile as far as spiders go. They'd rather run and hide than fight. But if threatened, she can flick these hairs off her abdomen as a defense mechanism." He turned slightly, showing Rosie's back end. "See these little barbed hairs? They're urticating hairs. They cause irritation if they get in your eyes or nose. It's her way of saying, 'Leave me alone,' without having to bite." "Bite?" Professor Hallis managed to say. "Oh, right. She has venom," David said casually, as if discussing what he had eaten for breakfast. "These fangs here." He pointed to the intimidating appendages near Rosie's mouth. "But tarantula venom usually isn't dangerous to humans. It's like a bee sting for most people, though some species have more potent venom, obviously. Obviously, the fangs also work like little pickaxes," David continued. "She can use them to dig burrows. And spiders have this cool ability. They can regrow lost legs when they molt. Rosie molted about a month ago. Her exoskeleton comes off and there's a completely fresh one underneath. She's very shiny right now." Helix finally found words through his bubbling panic. "How many legs did you say?" 8, David confirmed. "All spiders have 8 legs. That's what makes them arachnids instead of insects. Insects have 6 legs. And how many of these creatures exist on your world?" David thought for a moment. "Well, there are over 45,000 species of spiders that we've documented. Probably more we haven't found yet. They live pretty much everywhere on Earth. Deserts, forests, caves, mountains near water, and cities. Some species are social and live in colonies. Some are solitary hunters." The number landed like a physical blow. 45,000 species. "Some build webs," David said, warming to his subject. "Spider silk is stronger than steel by weight. Some orb weavers create webs 20 feet across. Some spiders live underwater in air bubbles they create themselves. There are jumping spiders that can leap 20 times their body length. There are trapdoor spiders that build hinged burrows and ambush prey. There are wolf spiders that hunt in packs." Each new piece of information made the situation worse. The students were learning that Earth wasn't just home to a few dangerous creatures. It was a planet absolutely covered in highly successful predators that had evolved in thousands of different terrifying directions. "And humans live among all of these?" Paris asked, her voice distant. "I mean, yeah," David said. "Most spiders are harmless to us. They eat mosquitoes and flies and other pests. A lot of people have spiders living in their houses without even knowing it. You probably walk past several spiders every day if you live in any Earth city." Asen made a sound that the translator rendered as hysterical laughter mixed with crying. "I keep Rosie because I find her fascinating," David explained. "Watching her hunt is amazing. She's patient, calculated, and really efficient. Plus, she's beautiful in her own way. Look at the patterns on her abdomen." To David, Rosie was indeed beautiful, a marvel of evolution, a creature perfectly adapted to her niche. To everyone else in the room, she was a living embodiment of every nightmare about things with too many legs that moved too fast in the dark. David let Rosie walk from one hand to the other, demonstrating her gentle nature. She's never bitten anyone. Tarantulas are actually popular pets among humans. There are whole communities of people who keep them, breed them, and share care information. Some people have dozens of different species. Professor Hallis finally reached her limit. Students, I think we need a significant recess. Perhaps the rest of the day. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss what we've learned. The 6 remaining students didn't need to be told twice. They evacuated with impressive speed, considering their various mobility methods. Within 30 seconds, only the 3 humans and Professor Hallis remained. Robert carefully returned Noodle to her container. Amy coaxed Bruno awake and got him secured. David let Rosie walk back into her burrow before sealing the terrarium. Did we do something wrong? Amy asked, genuinely confused. Everyone seemed really upset. Professor Hallis looked at the 3 humans, at their honest confusion, at the deadly creatures they handled with casual affection. She realized that the assignment had succeeded far beyond her intentions. She had wanted to build cultural understanding, and she had, just not the comfortable kind. No, she said finally. You did everything correctly. That's what concerns me. The emergency meeting took place in a smaller conference room, away from the classroom that now felt contaminated by the revelation of Earth's nature. Professor Hallis had called in Dr. Wynne, a xenopsychology specialist who had 3 doctorate degrees and 2 centuries of experience, studying how different species thought. Dr. Wynne resembled a collection of floating crystals that hummed at frequencies just barely audible to most species. Her thoughts translated through a sophisticated device that turned crystalline resonance into words. Tell me, she said to the 3 humans, what do you understand about why your classmates reacted with such fear? David, Amy, and Robert exchanged glances. They had spent the evening discussing this exact question. We know Earth is classified as a death world. Amy began carefully. We've been told that most species evolve on calmer planets, places where danger is rare. But we don't really get what that means, Robert added. Like we understand it intellectually, but we can't feel it. To us, Earth is just normal. Dr. Wynne hummed thoughtfully. Describe normal for you. The humans took turns explaining. They talked about weather systems that could destroy cities in hours. They mentioned tectonic plates that shifted and caused earthquakes. They described temperature ranges that swung from 50 below zero to 50 above, sometimes in the span of seasons. They explained about hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, and wildfires. And the life on your world? Dr. Wynne prompted. Everything's trying to survive, David said. Plants compete for sunlight. Animals compete for food. There are predators and prey, and most things are both depending on the situation. Humans evolved alongside some of the most successful hunters Earth ever produced. Professor Hallis pulled up images from Earth's database. Lions taking down prey 5 times their size. Great white sharks breaching the water with seals in their jaws. Bears that could kill with a single swipe. Crocodiles that had barely changed in millions of years because their design was already perfect for killing. And humans survived among these? She asked. Humans are apex predators too, Amy explained. We're persistence hunters. We can't run as fast as most animals, but we can chase them until they collapse from exhaustion. We're pack coordinators. We work together to take down prey much larger than ourselves. We're tool users who figured out how to make weapons that let us hunt anything on the planet. Dr. Wynne's humming changed pitch, indicating deep thought. So when you look at these creatures you bring as companions, the dog, the snake, the spider, what do you see? Bruno's loyal, Amy said immediately. He's protective, smart, and loving. Yes, he could hurt someone if he wanted to, but he doesn't want to. That's what makes the bond special. He chooses to be gentle. Noodle's calm and beautiful, Robert added. She's a perfect example of efficient evolution. Watching her is like watching a perfect machine. She's not aggressive. She just wants to be warm and fed and left alone. That's peaceful to me. Rosie's fascinating, David said. She's ancient and alien and perfect at what she does. Having her trust me enough to walk on my hand is amazing. She could bite, but she doesn't. That trust goes both ways. Dr. Wynne processed this for a long moment. You bond with these creatures because of their capabilities, not in spite of them. I guess so, Amy said. I never thought about it like that. Professor Hallis leaned forward. On most worlds, companion animals evolved to be harmless. They were selected for thousands of generations to be soft, gentle, and non-threatening. Your species went in the opposite direction. You took predators and made them into family. Dogs needed us too, Amy pointed out. Wolves that cooperated with humans got regular food and protection. It was mutually beneficial. Over time, we changed each other. They became less aggressive, more attuned to human emotions. We became better at reading their signals. But you still recognize the predator in them, Dr. Wynn observed. You said Bruno is protective. You value that he could be dangerous but chooses not to be. The three humans nodded. Dr. Wynn turned to Professor Hallis. I believe I understand what happened in your classroom. The other species saw predators, creatures with adaptations specifically designed for killing. But humans see something else. They see themselves reflected back. What do you mean? Professor Hallis asked. Humans are predators who learn to suppress their predatory instincts for the benefit of social cooperation, Dr. Wynn explained. They're capable of extreme violence but choose peaceful coexistence. When they look at a dog or snake or spider, they see a creature that could harm them but chooses not to, just as they choose not to harm each other despite being capable of it. The room fell silent as this sank in. Other species don't have this framework, Dr. Wynn continued. When a Valine looks at a glimmerwing, they see something that was never dangerous to begin with. When a human looks at a wolf descendant, they see a powerful hunter that has become a partner. The bond means something different because the stakes were always higher. Robert spoke up quietly. So you're saying we're not crazy for keeping these animals? Not at all, Dr. Wynn said. You're exhibiting perfectly logical behavior for a species that evolved the way you did. You understand predators because you are predators. You trust them because you understand the choice they make not to harm you, the same choice you make every day. Amy felt something click into place. Is that why the other students were so scared? Not just because of what our pets could do, but because of what it meant about us. Precisely, Professor Hallis said softly. They realize that humans are the kind of species that looks at an apex predator and thinks, friend. That says something profound about human psychology and capabilities. David glanced at his friends. Should we have brought different animals? Something less threatening? Dr. Wynn's humming took on an almost amused quality. What would you consider less threatening from your world? The humans thought about it. Cats, smaller predators with retractable claws and hunting instincts. Rabbits, prey animals but with powerful back legs that could break bones. Birds, descendants of dinosaurs with sharp beaks and talons. Fish, some with teeth, most with alien features that would disturb other species. Pretty much everything on Earth either hunts or defends itself really well, Robert admitted. Exactly, Dr. Wynn said. Your world shaped your perspective in ways you cannot fully recognize because you have no other reference point. But now your classmates understand something crucial about humans. You are what happens when a predator species develops empathy, cooperation, and civilization without losing the traits that made them successful hunters. Professor Hallis looked at the three humans with new respect. Tomorrow we will continue class. But this time the other students will return with questions. They're afraid, yes, but they're also curious. They want to understand what makes you different, and what makes us the same, Amy added hopefully. Perhaps, Professor Hallis said, though I suspect the gap between your normal and their normal is wider than any of us imagined. The classroom the next day held a different energy. All 17 students had returned, but they arranged themselves differently. Instead of the casual mixing of species that had characterized the class before, there was now a clear buffer zone around the three humans. Not hostile exactly, but careful. Respectful in the way one respects a live electrical wire. Professor Hallis began without preamble. Yesterday's presentations revealed some fundamental differences in how species conceptualize companionship. Today we're going to explore those differences through dialogue. I want to understand why humans make the choices they do regarding their companion animals. Amy stood first, with Bruno sitting calmly beside her. The dog had been remarkably well behaved through all of this, as if he sensed the tension and wanted to prove he was trustworthy. Can I ask a question? Paris said, her skin showing cautious yellow rather than yesterday's panic purple. You said this creature saved your family from fire. Can you explain that? Amy nodded. It was about 2 years ago, middle of the night. A wire in our kitchen sparked and started a small fire. Bruno smelled the smoke before any of the detectors went off. He started barking like crazy, running between bedrooms, scratching at doors. He woke everyone up. By the time we got downstairs, we could see flames. We got out safely because Bruno gave us warning. But that's an instinct, isn't it? Helix asked from his sphere. He responded to danger. Maybe partly, Amy said. But Bruno could have just run outside himself. Instead, he made sure every family member was awake first. He even went back for our cat, who was hiding under a bed. He carried her out by the scruff of her neck the way mother dogs carry puppies. The class absorbed this quietly. So the danger recognition goes both ways, Dr. Wynne observed, present as a consultant. The dog recognized fire as a threat and warned the pack. Humans recognized the dog's warning and responded. This is cooperative survival. Robert stood next with Noodle draped across his shoulders. Several students flinched, but no one ran this time. I want to show you something, Robert said. He pulled out his communication device and showed a video. In it, a younger Robert, maybe 15 years old, sat on a bed looking anxious. The video's timestamp indicated it was from late at night. This was during my final exams 3 years ago, Robert explained. I wasn't handling the stress well. Couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Watch what happens. In the video, young Robert picked up Noodle from her enclosure. The snake coiled loosely in his hands and his breathing visibly slowed. His shoulders relaxed. He sat there for several minutes, just holding her and letting her move slowly across his arms. She doesn't judge me, Robert said quietly. She doesn't care if I pass or fail my exams. She just exists. There's something calming about a creature that lives entirely in the present moment. When I'm stressed about the future or worried about the past, holding Noodle reminds me that right now in this moment, everything is okay. The class watched the video with new understanding. They were seeing a different kind of bond. Not protection or service, but emotional grounding. David stepped forward with Rosie's terrarium. Can I try something? He asked Professor Hallis. I promise it's safe. The professor nodded hesitantly. David opened the terrarium and coaxed Rosie onto his hand. Then he did something unexpected. He sat down cross-legged on the floor and placed his hand flat on the ground. Rosie walked off his palm and onto the floor in front of him. Just watch her for a minute, David said to the class. Rosie explored the immediate area around David's sitting form. Her movements were careful, deliberate. She touched things with her front legs before committing her weight, testing surfaces. When she encountered David's shoe, she climbed onto it briefly, then climbed back off. She wasn't aggressive or frightening in this moment. She was just a small creature investigating her environment with methodical precision. She's not thinking about hurting anyone, David said softly. She's just being a spider, existing, surviving, doing what millions of years of evolution programmed her to do. There's something honest about that. She's not pretending to be something she's not. She's perfectly herself. Paris, surprising everyone, including herself, raised a hand. May I come closer? David looked at Professor Hallis, who nodded. Paris approached slowly, her skin showing colors that shifted between nervousness and curiosity. She stopped about 6 feet away. She's smaller than I thought, Paris said. Most things are scarier from a distance, Amy offered. Want to try meeting Bruno? Paris approached the dog with visible trepidation. Bruno, sensing her fear, lay down and put his head on his paws, a submissive, non-threatening posture. Paris knelt at a safe distance, and Amy guided her through, letting Bruno smell her hand. When Bruno gently licked Paris's extended fingers, she jerked back, then made a sound like wind chimes, feline laughter. He's warm, she said, surprised, and soft. He's also loyal, protective, and yes, capable of defending his family if needed, Amy said. But those capabilities don't define him. What defines him is the choice he makes every day to be gentle instead. Over the next hour, something shifted in the classroom. Students asked questions about care requirements, about bonding processes, about the history of human-animal relationships. The Fenrir student admitted that there was something appealing about the idea of a companion that could protect you. Asen wondered aloud if his people had missed something by only selecting for harmless creatures. Dr. Wynne spoke up from her position near the windows. What we're witnessing is the difference between fear and respect. Fear says, that creature could hurt me, so I should avoid it. Respect says that creature could hurt me, but chooses not to, and that choice has value. Professor Hallis pulled up images of other Earth animals. Bears, wolves, big cats, birds of prey, sharks. Humans don't just keep the creatures you've shown us. They actively work to protect many dangerous species from extinction. Can you explain this? The 3 humans exchanged glances. David spoke up. We nearly lost wolves in many regions because we hunted them too much. Then we realized the ecosystems needed them. Without predators, prey populations explode and destroy vegetation. Everything's connected. Predators aren't evil, they're necessary. Maybe we understand that because we've been both predator and prey in our own evolution. And maybe, Amy added, we protect them because we see something of ourselves in them. They're survivors, adapters. They're just trying to live and raise their young and continue their species, same as us. The class ended differently than it began. As students filed out, several stopped to observe Bruno one more time. Helix asked if he could receive videos of Noodle to study her movement patterns. The Baltrine student requested articles about Earth's ecosystem balance and the role of predators. Paris lingered longest. You know, she said to the three humans, when you first arrived at the academy, we thought humans were interesting but strange. Now I think I understand better. You're not strange, you're just from a world that required different survival strategies than ours. Is that a good thing or bad thing? Robert asked. Neither, Paris said, her skin showing thoughtful silver. It's just true. And truth is valuable, even when it's uncomfortable. As the humans walked across campus later with their companions, they noticed the change. Other students still gave them space, but now there were nods of acknowledgement. A few brave individuals asked questions about Bruno's training or Rosie's care requirements. The galaxy was vast and contained multitudes. It had species that floated and species that burrowed, species that communicated through light and species that sang. Now it understood that it also contained a species that looked at predators and saw partners, that lived on a violent world and responded by becoming simultaneously more dangerous and more compassionate. That night, Amy sent a message to her family on Earth. Showed Bruno to class today. Everyone was terrified at first, but I think they understand now. Turns out having a death world for a home means we see the universe differently. Who knew? Her father's response came hours later, delayed by the vast distance. We knew. The whole galaxy is learning what we've always understood. The most dangerous thing about humans isn't that we can be violent. It's that we can choose not to be. And we make that choice while keeping company with creatures who make the same choice. That's what makes us who we are. Bruno slept peacefully in his container, dreaming whatever dogs dream. Noodle coiled on her heating pad, content and calm. Rosie waited patiently in her burrow for her next meal. And three human students went to sleep knowing they had taught their classmates something valuable about fear, respect, and the strange, beautiful bonds that form between species brave enough to trust each other. The presentations were over, but the real learning had just begun.